Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we are continuing with our series for the month of February, which is leading people and not programs. If you're new to this podcast, my name's Brent. I haven't said that in a while. I probably should do that more often. And so my name is Brent. I am a youth pastor in Abilene, Texas, and I co-host this podcast with my good buddy David Pruitt, who's also a youth pastor. We also both are worship pastors. And so he is in Sweetwater, Texas, which is about 45 minutes away from me. And we've known each other for a long time during our times in ministry, but we have been doing this podcast together for a while now. And for each month, we go through different topics. And like I said, the topic for this month has been leading people and not programs. And so we're in week 3 of this theme. And the topic for today is volunteers as shepherds, not chaperones. And I feel like that's something we kind of all get into at some point. We've all looked for that warm body to be in the room, so we are ministry safe or safe sanctuary or whatever terminology your church uses. But we have to move to this mindset that volunteers are spiritual leaders. They're not just logistical helpers. Now, I say that with a grain of salt because I do feel like you can have volunteers in your ministry that help you with administration, that help you with the logistics of things, and those are great volunteers to have, but we are talking more on framing the volunteer role of who is in your ministry with your students helping you out. And so, we're just kind of elevating the vision and the idea of volunteer ministry for this. And for a long time, many volunteers have kind of quietly believed their role is to just be there or supervise behavior or just assist the real leader. But biblically, they're shepherds. They are entrusted with souls, not just schedules. And so, in many ministries, volunteers are described as helpers. They're described as small group leaders, support staff, extra adults in the room, warm bodies, like I said earlier, but rarely are they ever described as shepherds. And over time, language kind of needs to change, or that language begins to shape expectations. If you don't call your volunteers to be greater than a person in the room, they're never going to meet that or past that expectation, because that's what they feel like they're supposed to be there for. And so if you don't shape that language and you don't shape that mindset and that mentality, they'll never move past the expectation that they internally feel like has already been set. So if volunteers believe that they're there to monitor behavior or manage logistics or keep students quiet, that's all they're going to do, and they'll never step into their true influence. One of the things that kind of goes into this question, David, and I'll let you throw your 2 cents in on this too, is the mindset of oftentimes I reference stuff you can use, Kenny and L. Campbell, because they've done a lot of good stuff for just the youth ministry world. And one of the things that they do is they have a volunteer handbook, and it goes through the ins and outs of all of the stuff that you can do. I think now they've incorporated that into their Grow curriculum. But there's this volunteer handbook that we still use to this day where like I get the parents to sign it, and it goes through all the expectations, all of the responsibilities, and it's fully editable. But one of the things that they also include in their little volunteer bundle was the idea that if leaders stay still, they become stagnant. So basically, the idea was to have leader challenge cards, and it was individual for every leader because you didn't know what they were like. You knew each individual leader and what they were capable of, and so every semester you would give your leader a challenge card, and basically that was a challenge for your leader to do before the end of the semester. Maybe that was spark a conversation with a student every single Wednesday that you're up in the youth room. Maybe that was, hey, you're going to take lead on a lesson. Maybe it was, hey, make it a point this semester to try to attend one youth activity, like one youth extracurricular activity in support of them every month or something to that nature, something to push them out of their shell, out of their comfort zone, and begin to see that idea and that mindset of they are more than a chaperone. They are being a shepherd too, and it's their responsibilities and their opportunity to step into the lives of kids. And so I guess the key question that would kind of work towards framing this or reframing this mindset of like of goodness gracious, my brain, um, shepherds, not chaperones. Excuse me. Golly, that was a train wreck. Um,
It wasn't as bad as you thought it was. I promise.
so the idea of shepherds, not chaperones, I think this question is a key idea of reframing your mindset of maybe relooking at this with your ministry, and it's what would change if every volunteer believed they were a pastor in that room.
Yeah. So we've done whole episodes on scope and sequence of ministry, and I definitely think what Brent had talked about and having a volunteer handbook is so helpful for sure. But I think if you're going to have a language that cultivates expectation, I think have a simple model in place that helps equip your volunteers to equip the students. And so one thing that we're doing, and this all comes from a John Mark Comer study called "Practicing the Way." It's a book that I have read several times, and we have the small group curriculum. We're going through that with our students, but this has really helped our volunteers be shepherds through asking three core questions um, that help them go deeper. And it ultimately comes from a system of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. So I tell our volunteers, it's like there's a lot of things that we'll do event wise, like driving vans and cooking meals and different things like that. We know all of that comes with it, but when it comes to diving deeper with students, ultimately making disciples who make disciples, which is ultimately our goal, we need a process and a language around that. And so, one thing I like to teach is been teaching our students this, but before I took some time with our volunteers, is like we need to define what a disciple is, and defining that ultimately, in my the way I see it, and certainly the way the book practicing the way lays it out, is that following Jesus is not just some one-time decision. It's a lifelong journey of apprenticeship. And if you look at the traditional ancient practice around that, it really was, man, when you look at the Jewish way of becoming a disciple, it's pretty crazy. And so the question that we need to be asking our volunteers is not are you a disciple, but who are you a disciple of? I think we ask that question of our students all the time. We don't ask our adults as often. But the truth is, we're just as captive to our phones and social media and the issues just as much as our kids are. And to think that we've sort of figured it out is just crazy. And so we need to train our volunteers to understand the invitation to follow Jesus, which is that everyone is a disciple. And so it really comes down to three main things. Number one, being with Jesus. Number two, becoming like Jesus. And then number three, doing as Jesus did. If you can have a simple model like that, that helps volunteers come to a place of how to disciple. We ask the questions like, can you share the gospel with a student? Yes, that's got to be the number one question, right? Can you share the gospel? If you're not comfortable, let's equip and train you to do that. But when it comes to, okay, they're bought in, they love Jesus, they want to go deeper with Jesus, there has to be sort of a simple expectation that helps them navigate discipleship with students. And so for me, that has been one of the easiest ways to kind of shape that training with volunteers. And so, number one is being with Jesus. You can't be a disciple of Jesus if you don't spend time with him. And so, being with Jesus means you're spending time in the Word, you're worshiping, you're reading your Bible, you're taking time to listen and meditate what God might be saying to you and asking what the Spirit's doing and how He's moving. Then we move into sort of that step two. We're becoming like Jesus. And in the Methodist language, we talk about justification and sanctifying grace and all of that. And it's this process of we're always moving on to that place of perfection that we'll never quite reach, but we're trying to get there, right? And so it's that grace of God and working in us. And so number one, we're being with Jesus, we're spending time with him. Number two, we're becoming like Jesus. And then number three, doing as Jesus did, which is ultimately to, we see in the call that Jesus had with his disciples in Mark chapter 1, which is to go and make disciples, make fishers of men, right? And so if we're going to do that, then ultimately, I like to, once I've kind of laid out those three things, I start to try to give like practical goals to help our volunteers kind of measure success. And I always tell them, was like, use your passions. Like, let's find ways to, how do you define your success and your goals? But what I like to do is just give them kind of a little practical goal with each one. And so in being with Jesus, kind of the practice is to develop a habit of turning your mind and your heart towards God. The goal for becoming like Jesus is that our thinking, our emotions, and our actions, and ultimately our relationships will reflect his character. So if we're becoming like Jesus, then the way that we think, the way that we feel, and the things that we do, and the relationships that we have will reflect Jesus' character. That's a good metric on whether or not we're becoming more like Jesus. And then ultimately to do as Jesus did. Jesus basically said, go out and make more disciples. So his ministry was about preaching and healing and serving and loving others. And ultimately to follow Jesus is to not just know about him, but to join in his work in the world. And so the metric in doing as Jesus did is exactly as simple as it sounds. Are you doing practical ministry? Are you loving people? Are you getting out in the community? That kind of thing. And so that one's a little bit of an easier goal and metric to follow. It's those
Yeah.
first two that take a lot of intentionality. So having some kind of framework of how to disciple that's really simple and easy to memorize, I think is a good tool in helping your volunteers become
Yeah.
a disciple and ultimately shepherds in your ministry. Being with Jesus, becoming like Jesus, doing as Jesus did. It's a
Sure.
good model to follow if you're looking for something practical.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I definitely agree with that. And you were kind of just talking through the mindset of like, introduce, like talking through all the things that we challenge or tell volunteers to do. And another question that kind of popped into my head is like, how do we introduce volunteers to students? Like when we have that new leader and we introduce them into the mindset of like, hey guys, like we have this new person, like, do we call them leaders? Do we call them shepherds? Do we call them small group leaders? What is the terminology that we're using? And are we missing that opportunity right off the bat to kind of throw this in? And then how are we continuing to challenge our students to engage with those leaders? And I just had this random idea. I don't do it yet, but like in the middle of David talking, this popped into my brain, and I'm totally gonna make this when we get off the podcast. We like probably most of y'all have a TV or a projector in your youth room that shows stuff. We do before service slides. I am going to make volunteer about me pages that just have like brief, hey, this is the person, this is some things that they like, this is their hobbies. And I'm going to put a different one up every week and be like, hey, go find this person and strike up a conversation. And leave it to the students so they can see it up on the screen and be like, hey, like, I didn't know he played golf. That's cool. I like golf. And like go up and be like, hey, so like when you say you're a golfer, like, do you play a lot, or like what do you shoot, kind of thing like that. And you can bring in those conversations. And so then it's also giving the students the opportunity to work on engaging in conversation. So like I said, just had that idea, popped into my brain in the middle of this.
That's
um
brilliant, dude. I literally
I
wrote it down too because
Yeah.
because I do the same thing. I have
Yeah.
slides that demonstrate like every single one of our ministries at our church. Like this is,
Yeah.
and I put a tag on each picture because it lets people know it's like this is what our kids are doing, this is what our youth are doing, this is what our choir is doing, and our adult ministries and our food pantry and all the different
Yeah.
ministries and stuff like that. And I've had a lot of people like give some really positive feedback. They're like, I love seeing the new pictures every week. Like I have some that were like, oh, I haven't seen that one. That's a good picture. Will you send me that? And
Yeah.
stuff like that. So it's been really cool. That's a good opportunity to highlight some of our leaders.
Yeah.
In
But
a
it was
way
just that mindset of like how like
connection,
that
man. That's
yeah.
good.
That question
Sorry.
popped into my brain though while I was while you were talking though. It's just the mindset of like, how do we introduce volunteers, and like do we do it one time and just expect them to fully include themselves into the group? Or do we like have to repeatedly kind of allow them to be guided into the dynamics of the group? And I think that's something we might be missing out on, because in all reality, if we want to show the students the seriousness of what we're doing and the seriousness of their roles in what they're like being a part of our ministry, like we have to preach the idea that volunteers don't just fill gaps.
Yeah. Well, and to your
Like,
point too, we also can't just assume that they know.
yeah,
Especially when you're in a smaller church like I'm in, like it would be easy just to assume that everyone knows everyone, but that's not true. We have
yeah,
students who have joined our ministry. They didn't grow up here. They don't know all of our adult leaders, and
yeah,
they didn't grow up here as kids. And so to assume that someone like Ava who just started, she doesn't know everybody,
yeah,
you know? Like she knows their name, but she doesn't know that Wes is a huge tech fan. Wouldn't know that
yeah,
without,
yeah,
unless she has a deep, not really deep, but a more intimate conversation with him to hear those things. And I don't know that she's ever had that. So I think
yeah.
I think that just brings up a really good point, is that we probably shouldn't just assume that our students know our adults and our adults know our students, but like actually give practical things that give them opportunities to learn about them. And
Yeah.
I think an About Me, I think that's a fantastic idea.
No, and like I said, I don't know why that popped into my head, but I was like, holy crap, that's a good idea.
Holy Spirit.
Yeah. I mean, I say I don't know where it came from, but I mean, but yeah, and so just this mindset of like, especially if we're like really trying to push that mindset of volunteers don't just fill gaps, they shape souls. If we really want to put that seriousness and that dynamic into our volunteers, what are we doing? And I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to like showcase the biblical significance of shepherding. And like if you look at shepherding in the Bible, shepherding is not a sentimental metaphor. Shepherding is a weighty one. It's really, really powerful. It's really, really heavy. And I mean, obviously, you look at like Psalm 23. I think that's probably the most like, oh, shepherd in the Bible. But like the shepherd, what does he do in Psalm 23? He leads, he protects, he provides, and he stays. Okay, so the Lord is my shepherd. I have what I need. He lets me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He renews my life. He leads me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even when I go through the darkest valley, I fear no danger, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Only goodness and faithful love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord as long as I live. Like, leads, protects, provides, stays, which is really, really big. And then you also, like, the other one that I think would typically be the one that we jump to is John 10. And Jesus is describing the good shepherd. And he's basically says, the good shepherd is the one who knows his sheep. The good shepherd is the one who calls them by name. The good shepherd is the one that is willing to lay down his life for his herd. Okay? So, if we look at the biblical understanding of shepherding, we're understanding that shepherding is relational leadership. It is personal. It is protective. It is patient. And contrast that with the idea of like, what we're hopefully moving away from is this mindset of the chaperone, where the chaperone is there to enforce rules, observe from a distance, and leave when the event ends. It's I'm here for an hour and a half. See you later. I have other things to do. When you're shepherding, those leaders might leave the room, but their minds haven't left the students. Their hearts haven't left the students. When they're shepherding, when they see those students on Sunday, they're like, "Hey, what's going on?" Like super engaged, super active. When they're chaperoning, they see a student on Sunday when they're a chaperone on Wednesday nights, and they don't even talk to them.
Yeah.
So shepherds don't clock out spiritually.
That's really good. That should probably be a T-shirt. Shepherds don't clock out spiritually. That's
I don't
good,
know
man.
how. I don't know how that would, like. I'm trying to visualize the design of what that shirt would. All I can think of is clock out is either like punch cards or like clock out like shooting a basket before the shot clock expires.
I would go punch card because I mean I've literally used that terminology quite a bit because it's like youth pastors don't clock out. We are always on the clock. Um, and sometimes it's silly little things. Like I have a student right now that, and I say silly, it's not silly at all, but not this particular situation. But I have a student who's just really passionate about a certain musical artist, and he has been sending me all kinds of articles and stuff that goes with it, and like the way that these lyrics weave together and stuff like that. It's not like personally my cup of tea in that realm. It's like heavy rap and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's something that this student is really passionate about. And like I've read every single article he sent me. I've watched every single video. And though some of it I'm like, you probably should not be listening to this. It's giving me like an open window to this student and what the student is passionate about, and I can totally reframe some of the stuff to go, hey, this is something you're passionate about. Now let me give you good resources in the same vein that point you more to Jesus than
Yeah.
maybe the culture. Or like if you're really passionate about culture, how can I take that culture and say, hey, all that passion you have for the culture, social justice, all of this, I can now reframe it in a way that goes, Jesus said, go and make disciples. Like the Great Commission is for our culture.
Yeah.
And the love and the justice that comes from what Jesus did, and you know, being able to reframe that, it's such a beautiful way to see that. And I think we can equip our shepherds to do the exact same thing, you know.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this in previous episodes. I feel like I say that every episode, but I guess when you've made almost 250 episodes, we've probably talked about just about everything, in one way or another.
Yeah.
But um, you know, it's ultimately allowing your shepherds. I love the idea of just not calling them volunteers anymore. Like just equip your shepherds to use their passions and their giftings to connect with certain, because you know Brent and I have
Yeah.
talked about this. Like there are some students that him and I are going to reach that someone else on our team would not be able to reach because of
Yeah.
the way that we're wired, because of the way that we see the world, the way that you know the things that we're passionate about, the things that we're gifted in. We're going to reach a certain group of students that someone else isn't going to.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I look at you know my two key volunteers that are always here, Wes and Sander, who absolutely are shepherds, and I see it every week.
Yeah.
Um, they have, like Sandra was a basketball coach and a track coach, and she can reach our athletes in a way I never will.
Oh yeah.
She speaks the language, and these students absolutely love going to her and talking about their practices and how they went, and asking her for advice on how they could do better, which is an incredible thing. That
Yeah.
is a relationship that I love. Sports, I can talk sports all day, but when I can't necessarily get in the weeds of how you can train better, Sandra can.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and that's a beautiful thing, and you get to see that and how she's able to and she's so good at crafting biblical, like weaving biblical principles into everything that she does. Like it's a beautiful, that girl is, I mean, phenomenal. And because I mean she was a teacher a long time, but she can weave Jesus into anything, and it's pretty incredible. So
Yeah.
allowing your shepherds to do that and always be pushing their passions and their giftings as a
Yeah.
way to lead in a more effective way than you can. And it really helps them go, oh man, like I'm not just serving you as the youth
Yeah.
pastor. I'm serving in an area that you can't reach.
Yeah.
So it elevates them.
Yeah. No, and I think there's an important value to understand right there too. Is like, and we've said this a couple times. David's in year 2 of being at the church that he's in, even though he's been in youth ministry for a long time. And I think there's an important thing to note right there is talking about Sandra, the ex teacher that used to be a coach, and with that, I think there's the valuable mindset to take out of that is David was aware and saw that skill set and like took time to realize that skill set, because a lot of times I feel like we don't even get to know our volunteers. And if we don't get to know our volunteers, then how are we going to utilize them or give them opportunities to empower them um, in ways that's going to ultimately help them and help the ministry? And so I think one of the tensions that we kind of have to work towards is like, if you raise expectations for these leaders without support, you create burnout. Okay? And so if you lower expectations to avoid burnout, then you create apathy. So, like, there's a dangerous line there of like, you have to create expectations that are meetable, but you have to provide support to get those expectations done. And so, I think healthy empowerment includes a few things. One of them is role clarity. What are they there for? I did find one of them, and I can put it in the notes. But so, volunteer handbook. Like I said, every year we give this to our leaders. And one of the only volunteer roles that we have right now, at least, is a group leader. And it says the expectations, relationships to students, stuff like that. It defines the win. And it says group leaders win when they build relationships with students and help students build relationships with each other. That is the, the goal of being a group leader. Okay? The qualifications. So we have expectations, we have specifics. Show up to our programs every week. We understand things happen. We need a committal of at least 75%. You are there at least 3/4 of the time. To keep things running smoothly, please stay till all your students are picked up. So even sometimes just clarifying what the actual responsibilities of that role are is super, super important. But then also like showing them, what are you responsible for? What are you not responsible for? Who can you lean on if you have a question or if you need help in an area? And so the thing is like volunteers need to know these things. If they don't, then like they're just kind of spinning their wheels and they're like, what's going on? I have no idea. And so ambiguity exhausts people.
One
Secondly,
thing
I
I
would
wanted
say
to,
you're good.
sorry, very briefly, one thing I wanted to highlight is something that you glossed over that I think is really, really key for your volunteers is having that expectation that they stay until every student is picked up is massive, because I have found, and I think you probably, if you've done ministry for any amount of time, have probably already seen this, is that one of the most effective times that your volunteers have with your student is afterwards. It's that core follow up of sometimes a lesson or a conversation or something just really hit a student in a certain way. Maybe it's something that they were already dealing with or struggling with, or a dynamic at home, and they just need someone to talk to. They're not going to talk to you before service starts. They're going
Yeah.
to talk to you afterwards. It's
Yeah.
because, when they show up, a lot of times the expectation is, hey, what's one fun thing, or who's that person I'm going to hang out. That's what they're focused on when they show up. Afterwards, if you've had an effective service, and and even sometimes when it doesn't go as well as you think it can go. Sometimes a student will come up and they want to talk about something really, really deep and really intentional. And that volunteer sticking around to the end communicates two things. Number one, that they're not just trying to walk out the door right away. I think sometimes we think that our students don't pick up on certain things, but like if you rush out the door the moment that it's over, I
Yeah.
think it can communicate, not always, but I think it can communicate with the student that they just want to get out of there as quickly as possible,
Yeah.
and that they're not important.
Yeah.
Now, will that happen? 9 times out of 10, probably not. But with one student, it might, especially if that one student was trying to get the courage and bravery, the nerve up to ask a certain volunteer a question, and they walk out and they didn't get to, and they're like, "Oh man, I missed my opportunity." You think that they're going to go, "Hey, I should text that volunteer," or I'll ask next week. It almost never happens. If you
Yeah.
lose that moment, you lose it.
Yeah.
And again, some students are really, really good, but I always think about that student that is trying to get the nerve to ask the question that they're really embarrassed to ask, and then they just walk out, and you're like, you've missed an opportunity with the student that really, really needed to have that moment. And
Yeah.
so, communicating something as simple as that with your volunteer to say, "Hey, stick around. You never know. There may be a student that needs you tonight."
Yeah.
And again, 9 weeks out of 10, you may never get that. But that 10th week, that student comes in and you end up being that person that really helps them through a hard situation. You never know. Being
Yeah.
intentional with your time could become a really, real, it may turn into a pivotal moment with the
Yeah.
student that you look back on and go, that's when we had real breakthrough with that particular student.
Yeah.
And so I think it's worthwhile. I know I took a really small thing and blew it
No,
up, but I
no,
think
you're good.
it's I
But
think there's something
I think that
good
kind
there
of
with
boils into the
intentionality.
point. I think that kind of boils into the point that was leading into, and that's the idea of like not only do your leaders need to know what they're doing, like role clarity is vital, but then also they need to understand that they have spiritual authority without isolation. Okay? So you need to make sure that your volunteers understand that they have permission to pray with students, that they have freedom to initiate conversations, they have confidence to lead spiritually. I tell my leaders all the time, if I didn't trust you, you wouldn't be up here. Okay? So with that being said, like if you don't have that trust instilled, they're not going to step out and do those moments. Even if that kid has that question, they're going to be like, "Oh, I don't know. Go talk to your youth pastor." Like they're not going to feel like they have the confidence or the freedom to answer those questions by themselves. And so also though, you need to understand and give them the authority of saying, "Hey, look, like not only I like give you permission and freedom and confidence to do those three things, but also I'm here for backup. I'm here for coaching if you want to learn how to answer that better, or if you want to maybe not even I don't that sounds really haughty. Coaching on how to maybe handle a situation. Maybe like, hey, you did that pretty well, but like, here's some other avenues that we could explore next time. And then finally, a space to debrief. Maybe that leader does have that really heavy conversation and they just need to unload. And so having that power to be like, hey, I'm here to debrief with you is really important too. Empowerment sounds like I trust you to lead and I'm here if you need support, which is really good. And then finally, you have to give your volunteers sustainable expectations. Shepherding is not being available 24/7. Shepherding is not solving every crisis that happens. Shepherding, and louder in the back for the people that need to hear this, shepherding is not replacing parents. Volunteers and youth pastors do not replace parents. That's why we have said a time and time again, your job is to equip parents and walk alongside parents to be the disciplers of their kids. You can help, but if they are making it where it's your priority and not theirs, you're doing it wrong. What sustainable expectations are for shepherding is faithful presence, prayerful leadership, and relational attentiveness. We need to raise the vision and not the pressure. Okay, so how do you do that? Honestly, with anything, we've talked about this with student leaders and student ministries before. The first thing you have to do is create ownership, and you have to create belonging. So students feel cared for when volunteers feel trusted. And so if you trust your volunteers to do things and actually have that ground to go do those conversations like David was talking about with Sandra, like if you trust them to have those conversations and have those moments, ownership grows because volunteers are being asked for insight, they're being invited into planning, they're trusted with responsibilities. And so instead of being like, hey, today we're going to be doing this, I need you to XX like XYZ, maybe we need to start asking our volunteers instead and being like, hey, we're doing this tonight. So what are you noticing in your group? Does this seem like this would be a good idea? Like, let me have your feedback of where the group is progressing so I know that I'm on the right track. Or, hey, what are your students wrestling with? Like, what's come up in conversation? Or, my favorite question to ask, because this is the one they get excited about, where do you see growth? Because most of the time when when a volunteer has a good conversation with a student, man, it is like candy. Like, absolutely, man, they come pumped up to come tell you about this awesome conversation that they had where this student finally understood or whatever. And like, it is cloud nine experience, which we've felt before. I mean, if we're honest as youth pastors. But like when the volunteer has that like first time feel of that, like that I don't even know how to describe it. Euphoria, like of like, just holy crap, they get it. Like, it's magical.
I call it the light bulb moment.
Yeah, the light bulb moment. And so like that's a really, really big deal. So like giving your volunteers the opportunity to answer that question of, hey, where do you see growth? Like who is the rock star in your group right now, and give them an opportunity to brag on those moments. It's huge. And then you're still showing them that their feedback matters. When volunteers see that their voice matters, that their insight shapes direction, and their presence changes lives, they want to move from assistant to shepherd. You don't have to ask them, they've already done it. They've built that investment. They have put in the time. They have seen the effort and seen the reward. And now they absolutely dive in head first. I bring up one of my leaders in Fairfield almost every time I talk about this, because I had a volunteer that like literally when I got to Fairfield, which is a pretty small town, 4,000 or 5,000 people, they were a 3A school at the time in Texas. They're 4A now. And it's largely just because there were a ton of people that lived outside of the city limits that still went to their school district. And so like this volunteer comes to me one day and he was like, hey, you need another adult up here. So I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to be up here, and I don't want to lead. I don't want to do anything, but I'm going to be that extra person. It's like, sweet, awesome, like kind of thing like that. And so slowly I started getting his opinions. Slowly I started getting his feedback. Slowly he started coming to me without being prompted. And he started saying, hey, like, did you notice this? Did you notice that this kid was dealing with this kid, or this kid was talking to this kid? And like all this stuff. And this investment is slowly clicking and building and building and building. And then I was like, hey, this year I want you to lead a lesson. No. Well, okay. Like, let's just think on it and pray on it. I'll give you the materials, but I want you to lead the lesson. Well, I'll think about it. That led to him leading the lesson, which led to him leading a small group, which led to him being basically kind of the guy that oversaw the junior high small groups, to basically being the guy that I left the youth program with when I left. And he continued to lead it with another volunteer for another 6 to 8 months until they found the replacement youth pastor. The guy that didn't want anything to do with being involved, he just wanted to be there. He bought in when he saw the need. He started showing me insight. He started helping me plan. He wanted to be a part of the plan, and I trusted him with responsibilities slowly over time. And man, he bought in hook, line, and sinker and absolutely dove headfirst in. And he was one of my favorite volunteers because of that. Like, dude absolutely loved ministry. He was a business owner. Like, dude owned like 4 or 5 different businesses in town, restaurants, gas stations, all kinds of stuff. So like he dealt with the crummy side of life a lot, like dealing with hiring and firing and everything else. Like Wednesdays were his high, and that was his favorite night of the week. And it was all because he chose to invest in the lives of students, and the students realized it and started pouring back into him too. So, reflection question for that is, do our volunteers feel needed, or do they feel used?
So I want to jump into that a little bit. This is by basically admitting a failure on my part, while also um, ended up becoming a really cool opportunity for somebody else. So the failure, and mostly just because as I was reflecting with this in my small group, they all told me how I did it wrong, which they were right. But essentially, what happened was I had a particular person who had come to me after church and was real excited, telling me several things, but also got really deep really fast and started talking about some things that he was struggling with and just wanted some prayer for. And I was trying to be very intentional with this person because they wanted to talk to me for whatever reason. And so I had that had that conversation with him, but I noticed that I had a student that was kind of waiting to talk to me, and I noticed he was there. And then after a couple of minutes, he walked off, and I had this moment where I was like, okay, this. I hope the student's okay. Like the whole time I was thinking, like, how can I bridge the gap and bring an opportunity where I could also talk to the student. And I guess where I did it wrong is I probably should have told that other adult, like, hey, can I get back with you? Let me make sure this kid's okay, kind of thing, because that's my primary ministry as a youth pastor. Is I got to prioritize the student over the other person. Or I could have, another good way is I could have brought Tyler in and whatever. But it was one of those situations where you have two different people who need you at the exact same time, and what's the best way? Do I tell the adult that he can wait, and or do I, either way, I'm invalidating somebody in this moment. And so, yes, I probably could have handled it in the point of going, hey, can you and I, can we have some intentional time? Because he has more opportunity to dictate his schedule than the student does. So that's
Sure.
where I could have what I did, and again, some people felt like I did it wrong, and I would agree with them in one way. But instead, what I did was I saw that there was a student that needed, and so what I did was I noticed that one of my volunteers was standing fairly close to where we were. I said, "Excuse me for just a second. Can I ask one of my volunteers something?" He goes, "Yeah, of course." And so I just said, "Hey," and brought the volunteer in and just said, "Hey, I noticed that the students seemed like they need to talk to me. I don't know if they're dealing with something or what it might be, but do you mind going and checking on that student and making sure they're okay?" Of course, not a problem. And then I apologized to the person I was talking to and just said, "Hey, I noticed he was hanging out there, and I don't know if he just wanted to talk or if something was going on, but
Yeah.
I felt like I needed to make sure that student is covered." And so where my small group was like, or my men's group I meet with was like, "You should have just told that other guy to wait and went and if you were concerned about your student." I was like, I heed the wisdom of that, but I also think, like, I don't know, maybe because of the conversation we're having about equipping our volunteers to be shepherds, I can't help but feel like I did it exactly the way that I should have.
I would agree.
I don't have to be the hero. I don't have to
Yep.
be the person. Just because that student wanted to talk to me doesn't mean he had to talk to just me. And
Yeah.
I think what happened, and the more I think through it, and I've kind of journaled the opportunity to kind of reflect on. The more I've reflect on it, the more I go, would the student not feel more loved because I didn't just make sure I wasn't the only one making sure that student was okay. Now
Yeah.
I've brought a second person in to make sure that that person was okay. And you
Yeah.
know what ended up being, the student just wanted to talk sports. That was it. We have a good connection. We talk a lot about sports, and he just wanted to get my opinion on the Super Bowl. That's literally why he was waiting on me.
Yeah.
But by that volunteer going and saying, "Hey, David was telling me that you're waiting. Just wanted to make he and I want to make sure that you're okay. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm okay." And he said, "Well, I think he's getting close to wrapping up. If you want to go, if you got a little bit of time, I think, especially if you come back in, David will absolutely wrap up the conversation if you show back up." He goes, "Okay, great. I'll be right in there." So he walks back into the sanctuary, having known not only I care in that moment and that I saw him even in the midst of that conversation,
Yeah.
but a volunteer saw him too and checked up on him. Now it's not just me checking in on him;
Yeah.
it's two different people. I can't help but feel like, even though all my guys said I did it wrong, I can't help but feel like, and not because I want to be right, but because this student was cared by more than one person.
Yeah.
He was
No.
seen
No.
and cared about. I
That's a
can't
win,
help but
dude.
feel like that was a win
Yeah.
in that situation. I empowered a volunteer to make sure that this kid was okay.
Yeah. Well,
And it was a small thing.
and from a
Ultimately.
third perspective, that guy that you were talking to just was like, "Holy crap, he's really intentional." He saw that
Yep.
student in the middle of talking to me, and he wanted to make sure that that student wasn't left out. That's crazy. Wow.
Thank you. Thank you. I was like,
No.
and again, I don't say that for validation for myself. I do see where I could have maybe handled that just a little bit better.
Done it that
Um,
way hundreds of times.
but I also can't help but go, this guy trusted me just as much as my student did.
Yeah.
I don't need to invalidate an adult just because I'm a youth pastor.
Yeah.
Here's two people
Yep.
that need my attention in this moment. How can I bring a second person to make sure that both are? And so, again, I can recognize some of the ways that I could have handled it a little bit better, but I can also recognize that I gave it an opportunity for a volunteer to step up. And now, not only does just as you said, not only does the person I was talking to feels invalidated or feels validated, but so does the student
Yeah.
and the volunteer.
Yeah.
I can't help but feel like I did it right.
Sure. No, 100%.
More than I did it wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, I could have. I probably should have. The one thing that I feel like I could have done a little bit better is if I would have actually said, "Hey, do you mind just giving me just a second? Let me make sure that the student's okay. Are you okay? Okay." I don't know. I don't know. I could have played it out 20 different ways, and some of it would have been right, and some of it would have been wrong. But
Yeah.
I couldn't think. I guess thank you, because I was like,
You're
I have
good.
played that scenario up in my head so many times, like, you know, because this is a group of men that are all double my age, and I'm like, okay, I need to heed their wisdom. I maybe did do that wrong,
No.
but there was a small
I would
part of me
disagree.
that I wondered if it was pride, but there was a small part of me that was like, I kind of think I would do it again, if I'm
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're listening and you have different thoughts, we'd love to hear it. But
Sure.
with that being
100%.
said, like, at least in my mind, that's a win because not only are you empowering the leader, you're showing the student that there's a village that cares for him. And then
Yeah.
on top of that, you're showing the intentionality and the effort and the sincerity of your ministry by taking a second out of that conversation to make sure that student was okay and checked on. Like, I mean, checks across the board for me. But so with that, I
Still
think
heed the wisdom that you hear, though.
yes. But with that being said, I think the last thing that we need to discuss as far as the volunteer side of things is, I mean, we've talked about the mindset of moving from chaperone to shepherding. We've talked about the importance. We've talked about how you instill and encourage and inspire them to actually do the ministry. How do we teach them to? If volunteers are shepherds, they have to be formed as well. And so we need to spend just a little bit talking about practical volunteer formation or just training your volunteers. And that mindset needs to be ongoing. And honestly, this is something I struggle with because I feel like a lot of times I I don't want to pull another night away from my leaders because like they're already committing to weekly. And so this is something that I struggle with as far as the avenue of doing that, because it's like, hey, like you already contribute every single Wednesday night to us. I don't want to ask you to come up another time a month or another time a quarter to do training, but I feel like that's something that we can probably do on the outside, and just give them stuff that they can do on their own time too. But training needs to happen. They need to know how to listen well. They need to know how to respond to doubt. They need to know how to pray with confidence. And they need to know how to speak to students. They need to know how to minister to students. They need to know how to be quiet and just listen, but also provide advice. Like they need to know when is the right time to do both. Like there's so many
Mm-hmm.
different things that like we do kind of just by breathing because we've done it for a while, or we learned the hard way. Let's be honest. And then the other half, like we expect like the volunteers that are shepherds to do it without any training. So like
Yeah.
we're asking them to be youth pastors when we're the ones that have experience and wisdom, and
Yeah.
so we need to be sharing that too.
So if I can speak just again briefly, this time actually briefly, you said that hey, I know me. Your role is to keep us on track. My role is to throw in color commentary. That's my job. Um, you land the plane, I take it off.
Mm-hmm.
But you said you kind of struggle with when is the best time to train volunteers. What we found in our ministry, because I asked the question straight up, because I felt the same way, especially coming in. I was like, okay, I have an opportunity to train. I have an opportunity to get new volunteers and stuff like that. So I just straight up asked our parents, like, hey, I need times from you guys according to your schedule. When would be the best time for us to meet and to talk about our ministry? And I always add practical training every time we. So what I do is when we have a parent meeting, I always start with the devotional, and that's where I put my training in. Where they leave with more than just, hey, here's a bunch of things to add to your calendar, your
Yeah.
already jam packed calendar, and here's all the things I need from you. I want to empower them and equip them. And so I start before we do anything else. Here's some biblical training. Here's a Devo, because a lot of parents don't get that outside of like a Sunday morning,
Yeah.
unless they're in an intentional small group. And so I always start with that. That's where I put my training in. But I just straight up asked the question. I was like, hey, especially because I've got some parents that travel 30 plus minutes to come to church. And so I really wanted to be intentional with them. They come into town. That's a big commitment for them. And so
Yeah.
it was like, when would be the best time for us to meet? Would it be directly after church on a Sunday or before youth?
Yeah.
To give them a couple of things that are like, honestly, we're gonna come back up for youth. Like it would be great if like after church we could go do lunch, we could go do the things that we do. But if we could do a parent meeting before youth, like an hour or so before youth, we can go ahead and bring our students up, and we can have some time to talk through what we need to
Yeah.
talk through. And the cool thing about that too is we always start with the meal for youth, and so even if we needed to go over a little bit, we could allow one or two of our volunteers
Yeah.
to go ahead and start the meal, so the students can like fellowship and eat and do all of that stuff, and we can keep talking if we need to.
Yeah.
Um, which that ended up transforming into one time we went over, and I just literally texted two of my seniors and just said, hey, can y'all start the meal without us? Yeah, no problem. And so then the students get to lead in that situation,
Yeah.
that particular scenario. But anyway, by having that conversation with your parents, they get to sort of dictate when the meeting happens. Then it's a situation, if for
Yeah.
whatever reason they can't make it, at least they feel like they're heard in that situation. So then you're not like, man, I hope I'm not pulling them too much, or I'm asking too much. Because I think as youth pastors, we're always asking the
Yeah.
question: are we asking too much? And I think sometimes the answer is yes, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But if you allow your parents to give you a time that works best for them, and then continue to ask the question, don't just say, okay, this is the time y'all locked in. Next semester, I'm going to say, hey, is this time slot still working for us? Yeah, yeah, I think it's great. Okay, cool. Or, hey, all of our schedules have kind of changed and things look a little different now. Could we maybe rethink it? Continuing to have that conversation, giving them that buy in.
Yeah.
then they're gonna make it a priority because they're gonna go, okay, this is something that I asked for, and so I'm gonna make sure I'm there. At least it's helped for us, and so it kind of takes the guesswork out and
Sure.
just straight up asks your volunteers and gives them that opportunity to buy into when your
Yeah.
training happens.
Yeah, no, and that's good. That's good. No, and I mean, I definitely think you need to find that dynamic. And the setup that you have for being able to do that before the meal is great. And yeah, like I said, I feel like it's very, very important. And realistically, it might just be a day of training, or it might just be like a hey, once a month you send them a thing online for them to read through and kind of let you know, like let them ask them to have feedback or questions or stuff like that, so they can just see what like so you can see where they kind of took it. I'm sure there's 100 different ways. Something else that like totally, if you have ideas on this, like we'd love to hear it, and we might even share them on next week's episode if you share them this week. And so, but I think the last two things that you kind of have to do for volunteer formation, we talk about all the time about how youth ministry is a very, very uncelebratory job. You don't have very many celebrations on things that are going well. You don't have very many things that you get to go celebrate with other people. You don't get much commendation for your job. You just kind of work in the back. And for a lot of youth ministries, that's the way that it happens. Um, that's okay, but we need to make sure, since we are in the forefront of that understanding, that we also need to make sure that we are making shepherding not invisible work. When we have volunteers that are killing it, we need to tell them. We need to give them that rhythm of personal affirmation. We need to show public appreciation and say, hey, our leaders are rock stars. And then we have to like allow them to share their stories of impact. And like their moments to where it really just clicks and they are absolutely in it to win it. And it's, I mean, everything's going good. Um, all of those things like make shepherding visible, so other people can celebrate with them and with you. And so like a huge dynamic that we really really need to work on as youth pastors with our volunteers. And then finally, spiritual care for leaders. We say this regularly at church camp. I say it with my volunteers every now and then. um, I can't expect you to lead if I'm not there for you. Like, even though you're leading for the kids, my job is to be there for you. And so, like, we need to offer check ins for our leadership. We need to offer successful and safe outs for our leaders. So, I said this in a podcast episode. I don't remember which one, but it said, I think it was from Ted Lasso, honestly, if I'm remembering correctly. Um, it says, a good leader doesn't expect no a good leader doesn't know when people will leave, they expect them to. Like, basically, like, you need to prepare and plan for the ins and outs of your leaders. You need to be able to see that when your leaders might need a season off, or they might need to retire from your ministry. You need to provide them that safe space and safe opportunity to where it's okay for them to do that. You need to offer prayer for them. You need to offer devotional resources for them if that's something that your church can do. Um, how are we discipling the people who disciple the students? So, kind of closing commission and prayer, something we've been doing for the past couple of weeks that we really feel like is kind of hit. Um, Speak directly to your volunteers. You are not background support. You are frontline spiritual leaders. Remind them that their presence matters, that listening matters, that prayer matters. Challenge and invite them to see their small group time as sacred ground. Okay, so we've last couple weeks we've enjoyed this, and it's more of just a, like we say that we're here to inspire, equip, and encourage you, the listener, and so we have been closing our episodes with prayer. Prayer directly and specifically over you as you continue in your ministry job opportunities. And so we're going to do that. Before we pray, just once again, we would love to hear from you. You can shoot us a message on social media at Talk Student Men is the handle on Facebook and Instagram, or you can just look up Student Ministry Conversations. You can also email us, podcast@studentministryconversations.org. Love to hear from you. Love to have feedback on this episode or any episode in the past, because we love to hear from you. And if you have any ideas on future themes or topics that you'd want us to cover, we totally are down for that too, because we want this to be encouraging and edifying for y'all. And if we're not listening to you guys, then we might be missing great opportunities for encouraging and equipping you guys to do ministry. So with that being said, we love you guys. Let's pray. God, we thank you for the people listening to this episode today. We thank you for the volunteers that are in their programs, whether they be parents or college kids or high school students or whatever fits that bill. We pray for confidence in the calling that these youth pastors have, that they are there for this purpose, they are there for this time and this season, and God has placed them there for a reason. God, I just pray for courage to lead spiritually, both students and volunteers. God, I pray for protection over their influence. I pray that discernment and wisdom is used in their situations that allows them to be safe with the ministry practices that they have, and also just protects them from anything that could potentially harm their influence. And God, I just pray for opportunities for students to encounter you through their care, through the care of their direct support, through the direct care of their leaders under them, or should I say alongside them. God, our focus and our goal is to bring more students to you, and we just pray that as the listener, the youth pastor or the volunteer or whoever's listening to this has the opportunity, even if they're not in youth ministry, to go out and make disciples. God, I pray that you give them opportunities to do that. I pray that you put people on their hearts that need to hear your word. And God, I pray for boldness and obedience to that request and that call that you have on their lives. We thank you for this time together. We thank you for the words. And God, we just pray that your spirit moves mightily through this episode, and that we just once again feel your presence from in the week to weeks as we continue to love on students. We thank you and we love you. Amen.